talk about everything that people say you shouldn't.
What was our mission statement?
I thought it was more or less along the lines of let's talk about everything people say you shouldn't talk about.
That
You know,
sounds
for
right.
years it was like, well, don't talk about religion or politics. But as I've seen in a number of memes, probably all rephrasing somebody else's original statement, was a generation of not talking about religion or politics has produced a society that doesn't know how to talk about religion or politics. And here we find ourselves
Gonna
imminently
kind of
divided because we just said, let's just not talk about the most important eternal things or the most, arguably, I'd say, the most important temporal unities. Yeah, let's just not talk about those. You know what? The weather's been crazy lately, right?
they'll work themselves out. It's fine.
Yeah, that, and they will, often to the detriment of the human species, but they will. I mean, it is what it is, will occur. I was thinking this week, watching the sort of whiplash effect in the news media, which for well over a year and a half, 2 years, has generally, not exclusively, but generally uh, fought back against any naysaying about the cognitive capacities of our current president, President Joseph Biden, and said, "Oh my goodness, all these cheap fakes. He's the best Biden. He's sharp as attack, sharp as attack, sharp as attack, sharp as attack." We've all, if we read the news, we've all seen that Project Mockingbird uh, effect occur, saying the same things over and over again. Sharp as attack. He somehow, in the course of, I would say, less than 24 hours after the debate, first debate between um, Biden and Trump for the 2024 debates, that entire narrative all of a sudden changed as though it was now a drastic emergency that people were just learning about, as opposed to people who have been spending 2 years sort of rejecting, denying. It reminded me a lot of, as I mentioned to you, the Jon Stewart appearance on Stephen Colbert when he joked about the lab leak theory regarding SARS-CoV-2, saying like, "Oh, well, where did this flood of delicious chocolatey goodness come from? Here in Hershey, Pennsylvania." And then people were like, "That's true, Jon Stewart." And within the next, I'd say probably month or so, all of a sudden people started treating the lab leak theory seriously, whereas formerly it had been decried as specific by a New York Times science reporter, Aporna Mandavili, as rooted in racism and xenophobia. So all of a sudden everything changed just because kind of people decided it. And in some ways I was like, oh, this might be an example where the media came to believe their own hoax. And that got me thinking about media hoaxes. And uh, I've been trying to think of an episode idea for us where I think my original idea was like, oh, maybe we can still do this as a future episode. Was like, okay, where am I? Am I heterodox enough? Like, do I just stick to the orthodoxy of my tribe strictly? And I would say that's generally probably a bad idea. If you have no points of dispute with your tribe, whether you're a Christian or your racial group or your socioeconomic, whatever, that would be unusual for you to be in complete and utter lockstep as a thinking human being. I would say it's a sign of danger. Not certain, but a sign of. So likewise, I was kind of thinking in that realm. And then I was like, this might be even better because this is a little even maybe more specific. Uh, because I think it's really hard to identify one's tribe, honestly. As I was trying to do that, I was like, what am I? I was like, started taking all these political tests. So this week, watching the media kind of like start to reject and treat as an emergency their former hoax, I had the question: what have I fallen for a media hoax? Is the broad question. I'm kind of assuming a double thumbs up. I could be wrong about that. And then I thought we could kind of unpack like media hoaxes we've fallen for, how we realized they were hoaxes, how we sort of quote unquote overcame that, what we did about it, and what it revealed about ourselves. Because I think there's fascinating sort of sociological, psychological, etc. Um, what is there, aspects of oneself that are revealed in the truths one holds to and the lies one believes.
Yeah, I mean, so we could just, start with that foundation. I'm a thumbs up to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
I
I'm a thumbs up.
I guess I would assume basically everybody is. They might not know it or admit it, but it just seems like a statistical reality. You know?
I think it's pretty likely. I mean, you think about the War of the Worlds, right? Had people report it. Now, maybe even this is a hoax. Maybe this is apocryphal. That the War of the Worlds had people jumping out of there,
Ah,
committing suicide, jumping out of off of roofs or whatever. They're like, it's all over.
it's
I
like
know
an
we,
Inception hoax where there's a hoax within a hoax.
yeah, hoax in a hoax. It totally is. That we start to think maybe in the modern age, like, well, we're far too, media literate for such a foolishness as that. And yet, my goodness gracious, no, we're not. And I think we're all hopefully pretty aware of this. And social media, I think, has amplified the awareness of this, both in the proliferation of false stories and then the proliferation of evidence of the false stories broadcast on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, OAN, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times. We're able to collate evidence and present cogent arguments as to how we're being misled, or even before everyone just starts accusing everything of being a deep fake, just showing you video evidence. Like, here's the thing, and then showing you the full clip of the video evidence. We can kind of again keep whatever unlocking the tesseract to understand more and more, but we still fall for stuff all the time. And if anyone, and this is going to be totally ageist, I'm just going to do it, but if any of you has an older parent, anybody I would say 70 plus, at some point you've probably been forwarded something and you were like, oh my goodness, wait, why do you think this is real? And you have to compose or respond or call back and kind of keep your tone in a non-condescending fashion, and you realize, oh my gosh, am I the parent now?
And I know that we're not going to focus on a deep analysis, but just a couple things coming to mind. One is in that vein of why do we fall for hoaxes? Well,
Yeah,
let's face it, we love stories, we love fiction.
yeah,
So there's a piece of it where I don't know, maybe some part of us knows that it's a story. And
yeah,
it's funny, like just earlier this week, I was talking to somebody and I try to catch myself, and our collaboration helps me build this muscle a bit to, if I heard something and I just really can't even remember where it came from, or it's
oh
probably,
gosh, yeah,
it may still be okay to say it, but just put the right
yep,
context on it. Like, oh, here's a story, or I heard this random thing, I can't validate it or whatever. So I think that's one of the problems is
yeah,
often we're presenting things, and I do this too, where we don't make that distinction. And so that, and it used to just happen just in gossip or word of mouth. And as you're saying now,
yes,
media has made that just spread like wildfire. And the other thing is, which we talked about quite a bit on the show, is just we love knowing the answer. I mean, it gives us a sense of
yeah,
confidence and knowing the world and probably safety and security and superiority. Like all of these things that
yeah,
make the ego feel really groovy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And religion in so many ways, I know this is very like Jordan Peterson thing, but religion in a lot of ways is based on groups coalescing up around agreeing to the same story. Yes, this story is true. Even if you weren't there for it, you're like, yes, we all know or believe this story is true. And so in some ways, I actually think like who believes what hoaxes could provide sociologically a pretty good boundary definition of one's tribe. Like, oh yeah, we all believe in that thing. We all like if you find I used to remember the people who were into conspiracy theories back before, at least in my social circle, before pretty much everyone I know is into conspiracy theories of some sort. Whether, to use COVID as a great example, whether COVID was created in a lab by, people at the WEF in order to limit population and produce authoritarian outcome, or on the other side, the COVID response was proof that the world's pharmaceutical companies and governments are in cahoots to heal and help the population. Those are both conspiracy theories, and we both hold them. But when you would run into somebody who was like Paul McCartney died, whatever decades ago, right before Sergeant Pepper's, I think. And that person was like, right, I know the evidence is pretty strong. All of a sudden, friends for life. You watch people just like immediately bond, over this shared view of like secret gnosis, right? Secret knowledge. So it's funny in that way too to think of it as a like a communally bonding thing. Which ones do you? Was the moon landing fake? Yes. Okay, you're my type of guy.
The some analysis of how the altimeter works on an airplane is one I keep seeing a lot now to prove flat Earth theory.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, I've gone like 25 minutes deep, maybe with one person on flat Earth, but I haven't gone deep enough. Like, I really want to know more. I find it so fascinating. I'm not a flat, I don't find it particularly convincing personally. But I'm fascinated because I know smart people, and I don't mean just people who are educated, because education is not an indication of intelligence, but actually intelligent people, like people who are able to intake information, fast process information, and arrange it in some sort of proper or communicable order, and whatever. That's my best estimate of what intelligence is. Actually intelligent and educated people who are like down with the flat Earth thing. Fascinating, dude. That is not a hoax that I've fallen for, folks. Oh, but my name is Brendan McNamara.
And my name is Andy Swindler.
And this is totally classic, where I guess, at least for me, my mission statement was, I mean, it can be longer because I think curiosity and love kind of feature very heavily, and harm reduction is like all on the branding board. But for me, generally, this is where we talk about things that people say you shouldn't talk about. But I'm going to do it, and I'm going to volunteer my hoax first. So one of the things that prompted this was there was a recent Supreme Court of the United States Supreme Court ruling. And out of this ruling, it was actually about like which evidence was going to be admissible in like Trump trials. And out of it, the response of it, before I'd read anything about it, was Trump is now, if Trump gets elected specifically, which is already weird, then he will be like a king. He'll be a president unlike any we've ever had. He's going to be above the law, above the law, above the law, above the law, above the law. Again, folks, I'm not saying these are technically Project Mockingbird, like CIA weaponizations, but these are, anytime people start saying the same phrase over and over again, that's time to go, wait a second, what is happening here? Why are you all saying the same thing? It's creepy. It's creepy. It's creepy. It's creepy. So everyone's saying above the law, not a president, but a king. He's like a king. It's made him like a king. Again, I saw these things popping up and I was like, oh no, what did this potential despot do now? I didn't have that much cause to doubt it because just, I don't know Donald Trump personally, but he does seem like one of the more self-serving human beings in our popular pop lexicon of the moment. So I was like, oh boy, what did he do now? And at least for a while, maybe less than 24 hours, but still for a number of hours, I was like, oh man, did you hear what he did? And I was like, I can't wait for all the people I know who are going to be furious about this to tell me all about it. And then instead they just regurgitated stuff. But I fell for that particular hoax pretty thoroughly for at least, I would say, a day, if not half a day, where I was like, oh, dang, here we go. Because this has been happening throughout the past couple of weeks with SCOTUS, where they basically pushed a decision down to back to the lower courts, as for government being able to censor the public, which I didn't know was allowed. But they're like, well, you proved that they censored you, but you didn't, and you proved past harm, but you didn't prove present or future harm, was essentially the standard it didn't meet. And so we're not really going to, they essentially sort of passed on ruling it, really. They sort of just, they dismissed it though. But they dismissed it on standing, not on the evidence, if that makes any sense. So I was like, okay, great. So now the US government kind of has a far more carte blanche to just actively censor whoever they want for whatever they want. So to me, them now giving extra magical powers to a presidential administration seemed right in keeping with that previous ruling. So I was like, heck, here we go. So that was the hoax I fell for just in these past couple of weeks.
I The only reason I didn't fall for that hoax is,
Yeah.
again, perhaps due to the muscle building here. I I had a couple conversations where people were all in on it using that language you're saying,
Yeah.
and I would just say, yeah, I'm not sure yet, and I need to look into it.
Yeah.
And so it's good in the sense that I paused. It's like,
That's
you know,
that's huge wisdom, Andy. It's
I don't
pausing.
know. I haven't. I'm trying to actually do my own research these days. But on the flip side of that, I haven't yet really done my own research. It's something I struggle to find a lot of
Yeah,
time
yeah.
for. So I don't know that that's that much. It's probably better in the sense that neutrality is better than spreading fake news. But I think the best step would be to pause and then do more research. And yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. Well, well, it's funny because then I reached out to you probably within 24 hours of like debunking my own hoax, the hoax that I'd fallen for, um, by reading again in the modern age. I don't know why I still fall for these. I reached out to you within 24 hours going, hey, have you heard about this thing? Because this is one of the things that animates me regularly is when I feel, especially when I feel like I've been duped, then I'm like, okay, wait a second. It's probably a tone of arrogance in there that like, well, I'm not easily tricked. I don't think of myself as a highly suggestible person. So when suggestion works on me and I discover that it was false, I'm like, it inspires me. It gets me so excited. It really pumps me up. It like it's caffeine for my day. Yerba mate for my soul. And so, but that's where I reached out to you because I was like, oh, maybe you're seeing it in your circles. This is malarkey. Why are people talking about this? This is again, I wanted to use a famous, I love using malarkey even before Biden made it popular, but this is a shout out to Joe Biden. Uh, this is malarkey. This is totally not true, but people are saying it all over the place. And I started seeing it all throughout my timeline. And then when I saw certain people share it, that's what actually clued me in. People who are unreliable. I follow people who are unreliable, people I know in real life. And then when they start sharing things, that's sometimes a good clue for me that I'm like, they're wrong about most things. Let me go look into this now. And so
mm,
I actually read it and I was like, oh, wait, this is the same sort of immunity that Obama invoked when he murdered that 16-year-old American citizen with a drone bomb outside of a war zone on purpose. And they were like, yeah, but it was within the context ultimately of combat overall. So it's kind of in the presidential thing. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Or I was like, wait a second, isn't this just normal? I was like, isn't this like old? And I looked it up, and there's precedent for presidential immunity of some sort going back to the 1800s. There was a huge case in the 80s, a Nixon case, where essentially civil immunity, in the same quote unquote absolute sense, was applied to the president, where the president couldn't be liable for civil lawsuits or whatever. And the Obama one started to expand it kind of more into the realm of the criminal. And then that wasn't a SCOTUS decision, but that was just like something that happened. It was potentially going to be ruled on, and eventually people just were like, well, let's just let it go. Fog of war, it's going to be fine. So basically, what it does seem, it seems like the decision certainly expanded the civil protections into the realm of the criminal, in an absolute sense in official dealings, and in a presumed sense in official dealings. But that started to be squirrely. So there's still wiggle room, and it didn't dismiss all the bases of evidence, just some of them. And then any personal activity while president was not assumed. There was no immunity assumed. Again, it all makes sense and it's completely within precedent. It's actually not that shocking or alarming. And I just learned that by reading the actual opinion. Let's be honest. I skim read, and then reading the dissenting opinion. Which again, this is the coolest thing. This is what I do. I don't always pause. Sometimes I go, oh no, this is terrible. And then when I find it, it's not. I was like, well, wait a second. Anything gives me a buzz feeling, I go, okay, well, let me do my best to understand what the heck is going on as best as I can. And then let me go to primary, whatever quote unquote primary source there is. In this case, we all have access to SCOTUS blog, and there's all sorts of excellent resources. And you can just go to their actual, they publish every stinking opinion and dissent. And so if you just read the dissent and were like, this is all true, then yes, you could get into hyperbole. Or if you just read the opinion and like, this is all true, then you could get into hyperbole as well there. But I try to be pragmatic as to like, okay, well, wait, what are the precedents here? Let me read some lawyers' analyses. I'll always check in an expert opinion to see if that helps me understand it. But I go into, again, we've known this, but like I go into research mode as to like, okay, especially if I've been tricked though, because then I'm like, okay, well, I better make sure, because in a way, I want to be right. So I
right.
better be, I have to be as thorough as possible, just in case my initial instinct was correct.
Yeah. Well, I love that ferocity of research and you going right to the source, and that happened with a number of studies related to, other topics we've covered. And it's interesting to hear that ferocity is amplified for a variety of reasons when, yeah, when you feel like you've been duped, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, when they get
And
me with it.
and especially with the Trump hyperbole. And again, I think largely thanks to our conversations, I just don't trust any of it anymore. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by, I live, I've been in very progressive woke communities for years. We talk about that all the time. People I love and trust on many subjects, but oh my God, is it hard to even question
Yeah.
the idea that we're about to elect a dictator and become Nazi
Yeah.
Germany. I mean, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe, but like, are you really looking into it, or are you just like passing on that headline? Like, I don't know. So,
Yeah. And that's a weird thing to me. Like I think I have a fear because I am a zealous person. I'm set to go street preach about the gospel of Jesus Christ in the streets of Milwaukee next week, um, outside the RNC, and or during the sort of week of the RNC, and that's so there'll be more people in town to preach the word to. So I'm a zealous person, man. I enjoy being a full-on-a-thon. So I probably am stimulated somewhat by in fear of becoming like that and seeing that as ultimately like a moral failure, certainly of highest priority. That's the highest priority problem. But then an intellectual failure has a is not the highest priority for me, but has a very particular flavor to it. That's the sugar for me, is the like intellectual failure. That like if my brain ceases to work properly and I become just like, what do you mean? How dare you? This is the biggest problem there. You know what I mean? Get into that mode without like comprehensive sets of evidence. Then I'm like, if I'm going to be zealous, I better have the best argument of anyone I'm going to talk to, or else, and I better talk to people who disagree with me all the time in order to check myself, to check those weaponry, you know? But I know for me that tethers to like an egoic sense of being like valuing almost to a moral degree, being a rational person, like a reasonable person. Like that is a priority for me. And I know it isn't for a lot of people. I think being like a loyal friend is more important to a lot of people than being a rational person or a reasonable person, for example. I'm just as like another positive quality, so I don't just immediately make it negative. And so
hmm.
being like a loyal tribalist is a version of being a loyal friend. And people are like, yeah, that's way more important than being. People say this all the time, right? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Like, come on. Oh, you want to be right or do you want to still have all your friends? To me, it's the easiest answer in the world. But I think people ask that question because you're like, come on, this is something to really consider. Like, do you want to have a community or you want to be right? You're like, I mean, I want to be right always. What do you mean? Like, what sort of community would I have where like right wasn't prioritized? Like, that's a cult to me. But again, I grew up in a Christian church, and so cultic thinking has like always been part of that concern, living within the church, and then being in a society that disagrees with you and being like, I want to make sure I'm not a cultist because that's how people look at me, and then making sure I don't fall into the cult of the zeitgeist itself, the culture around me. Puts all those like a very particular set of priorities, I think, to me as a person, you know.
Well, and as we all now know from Inside Out too, spoiler alert, you've got Friend Island, which is separate
Yes.
from
Yeah.
your belief strings, I guess you might call them.
Yeah. They can and you wouldn't really want to intermingle them, right? That would be a I think that'd be a misappropriation, so to speak.
So, should I talk about my hoax? My
Yeah,
first.
I'm excited to hear.
So, I immediately went to the Iraq War,
Oh yeah.
campaign shock and awe.
Hmm.
This was post 9/11, famously.
Yep.
This was the big retaliation from George W. And also famously, turned out we invaded the wrong country.
Yeah. The quote unquote wrong country. Yeah.
No big deal.
Whoops.
Yikes. So for me, and this I was saying before we started the recording that part of this questioning for me is well, I of course absorbed all of this through the media, and I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So when does it start being a media hoax?
Hmm.
When does it stop being the media just portraying something the government's doing, and then
Yes.
actually start being a hoax? So that
Yeah.
question this in the context of our larger question of,
Yeah, yeah.
did I fall for a hoax? But since the media, my experience, I was unemployed at the time,
Oh
and
wow.
I sat on my couch for a week straight watching CNN like 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
smoking weed, and I it was too much. Like, I mean, it was
Yeah.
only one news source,
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
we could talk about what that bias looked like, 20 years ago. Um, it wasn't healthy. I mean, by any stretch. I mean, just sitting around
Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
TV of any kind, probably that much is not healthy, but certainly just like absorbing all this energy. And I think the reason what I'm laying on the media, especially CNN, was just how much they bought into the shock and awe and the patriotism and I mean, let's face
Yeah.
it, it was this retaliation. It was like fuck Saddam Hussein and like,
Yeah.
let's get him back. And I mean, shit tons of probably Muslim rhetoric and all of it. And it's like, wow, just all wrapped up in a total lie, right? Like from top to
Yeah.
bottom,
Yeah.
and wildly destructive. I don't know if we ever did anything remotely represent like close to reparations. And if we did, it's probably just building a bunch of like McDonald's and Home Depots over there. So yeah, that's my big one. I just was like,
Yeah, that was a
wow,
huge one. I mean, journalists have apologized. I remember what Tucker Carlson or whatever has famously like apologized for that multiple times.
no.
He was like, I totally bought into it and jumped on that bandwagon and beat the drum, and I was wrong. I remember for me at the time, well, it was very savvy, the whole thing. I can't remember how much I was convinced. I was 9/11 happened. My uh girlfriend, or was she already my fiance? Anyway, my girlfriend at the time was living in New York, was stuck at CNN because buildings started blowing up. I was supposed to fly on the 12th to New York City. I flew on the 14th, I think. I flew on the first flight so I actually saw the smoking buildings and stuff from overhead. It's pretty wild, but I wasn't there. But I immediately, again, not a big conspiracy theorist person, but my immediate thought on 9/11, I remember Alex Scarlett called me the day of. He's like, Brendan, wake up. I was asleep. He was like, you got to check on Archie. New York, they just blew up the World Trade Centers. I was like, wait, what? And we went to like a diner and watched the news and like ate together and talked about it. Pretty much by the end of our conversation, I was like, I wonder who did this. Like, did we do this? Like, this seems like wouldn't you can imagine, right? People killing whatever, just like a couple thousand people to like rally a populace to do something. It's really not that big of it's honestly not that big of a deal when you look at the death toll in Gaza, for example. You're like, it's flipping drop in the bucket, man. There's nothing. In terms of listen, I understand these are human beings, but I'm just saying in terms of like people doing terrible and disgusting things in order to just do what they want. Um, so then when they started trying to go to war, I was like, oh boy. And they're trying to get George's dad's kind of failed war. Because I still remember
Right.
I went to my first
Desert Storm.
Celtics. Yeah. I'm getting my dad's enemy back. My dad lost this one. And he's
Yep.
like, he told me to go get him. So I thought that's what was kind of going on. However, Colin Powell, I don't know why I think Colin Powell is like a trustworthy guy. He has a high Q score in my brain. And I remember when he specifically testified, I don't know why I was watching that. When he testified about the weapons of mass destruction element, um, I was like, oh, Colin Powell's in on it? I don't know. He seems like a pretty inspirational guy. I don't know if I absorbed that probably through grade school, right? Talking about him as like a, whatever, black leader. And I, again, I've done, you sent me that Harvard bias thing. I have a bias. I have a pro-black bias, implicit bias. So here's Colin Powell. I mean, he's a light-skinned black man, but still, he's a black man. And like whatever, a famous black man. So I was like, oh, he's on board. He seems pretty convinced. Oh, and then I started to believe it as well. Like that, the Colin Powell appearance for me was like the moment where I was like, oh, this might be a legit thing. In which case, I still don't know if this has anything to do with 9/11. And I don't know that we need to go get revenge exactly like on a whole country. That seems weird. But if they're a serious problem, then this could be bad. And I've been afraid. And then I've been afraid of nuclear holocaust my whole life. since like nightmares since whenever I grew up in the Cold War, and my dad made a documentary or like a sorry, not a documentary, but like a narrative piece based on sort of documentary understanding of nuclear holocaust. So I've been afraid of it my whole life. So I was like, okay, that inspired fear in me. So I was like, okay, I want to respond to that fear. And then I remember the first war, and I don't even remember what year that was, but I went to my first Celtics game. And then we got out of the Celtics game, and on our drive back home from Boston back up to Maine, uh, that's everything on the radio was just talking about they had just started, what was it, Operation Freedom something? I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, they had just started bombing, dropping bombs in Iraq in the first Iraq war. And so for me, I was like, oh, okay, we're just kind of finishing what we started over there. So it totally, and it applied on a lot of essential fears or essential cultural fears in a way that makes it make sense that it would be convincing.
Oh yeah, I showed Rachel True Lies the other day, which
Oh
still
yeah.
has many merits, but uh, thankfully the Muslim terrorist trope is like so comical. It just seems like a
Oh, it's
cartoon.
hilarious. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it is.
It's
I
like,
mean, the
oh,
whole movie is a cartoon.
this is
Yeah,
clearly a joke. Like this is not even. Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
Anywho,
so that one makes sense. My second one is very similar to the first. That's why I started playing on some of those elements that I knew would echo with it, which was the danger of COVID-19. I fell for that. Um, I was genuinely like, I was seriously concerned in a way that I didn't want my family to kind of know. And I was living at my parents' house at the time because we'd moved across the country. Um, I'd gotten severely sick with, at the time, I was diagnosed with influenza B. Most people in my life are convinced that I had COVID in February of 2020 because it was bad. Like I was coughing so much that I couldn't breathe and that sort of thing. And I never had that from the flu. So I might have had a co-infection, or they weren't even testing for COVID yet because it wasn't a thing. Um, and I might have spread it across the country, guys. Hey, you're welcome. What can I say except you're welcome? So, so I might have had it, who knows? And then I had ulcerative colitis in full like 4-year flare at that point. Which means not only was I pooping myself up to 16 times a day, okay, not pooping myself 16, I was pooping 16 times a day, maybe once or twice in my pants, and or somewhere where it shouldn't have gone, unless whatever, I was the unhoused. So immune compromised to quite a significant degree, and early on, that was like you guys are the most in danger. Immune compromised, comorbidities, and I just the previous year had done a thing with my friend, some pieces educating on what it's like to live with arthritis, and so I'd learned all about cytokine storms and comorbidities and blah blah blah. So I like although I'd been deeply immersed in the language that all of a sudden permeated like pop news. So I was for 2 weeks or so, I was definitely like, oh snap, we're stuck in this strange place, even though my folks' home, this place isn't home to me. I'm in danger. What if I die? I'm gonna like I have 2 young kids. Like my wife will be okay. She earns more money than me anyway, but like psychologically, what's gonna do to my children? And I had 2 weeks or so of being like, oh no, this is deadly. And my general tone is skepticism towards anything the government says or media or whatever. Just since I was little, I just grew up in Boston, and everyone around me was a Democrat, but everyone around me was skeptical of the government. So that's just what I thought was normal. But then I think there was things like people were dying in the street from China. There was images coming out of people like dying and literally just bodies being left in the middle of the street, and people like ran out and like running past the bodies, and like I was just like, oh wow, this is like Contagion. This is one of those movies with like a patient zero. This is hardcore. In some ways, this might be the apocalypse I've been waiting for, but I didn't expect to have ulcerative colitis flare when the apocalypse happened. So I just felt completely unready and not like the provider or protector that I was supposed to be as a man and as a husband and as a father. So I had a couple weeks of being like F. F. I am like this is a serious problem. This could be a world ender, a society changer or whatever. And it was a society changer, but in a lot more just authoritarian Nazi Germany kind of ways more than whatever. Obviously, I am legend. But that got me. That got me. I don't know if it ever got me to the degree of I've been, I've shared this on our uh, pod a couple times where this study from polling results from Gallup in when was it? Gosh, September 27, 2021. By the end of the year, where what was it? Okay, let me get this correct. Where essentially hospitalization, they'd asked people about hospitalization of risk. And they said for unvaccinated hospitalization risk, 2% of Democrats responded correctly. I just want people to hear that. Most of my friends are Democrats, so hear that. Compared to 16% of Republicans. Not much better Republicans, but significantly better relatively one to the other. In fact, 41% of Democrats replied that at least 50% of unvaccinated people have been hospitalized due to COVID-19. So this is September 2021, mind you. So that's 2 years later, right? Like, well, November, I guess, is when it first started circulating, but well over a year and a half.
Mhm.
Democrats thought half of unvaccinated people had been in the hospital for COVID-19. Now, at the time of the polling, the percentage, the best estimate percentage based on data, studies published, etc., was 0.8%. So that is, I was not the only person. Again, I don't say this to like cover my ass, as I wasn't the only person that fell for this hoax, but certain people fell for this hoax more than others. But it was absolutely a hoax. People were hoaxed because people had this consistent like sense of things. Again, very much driven by news media. That was a disproportionate to a degree I can barely comprehend. I mean, to get from zero point 0.8 to 50, that's orders of magnitude. That's so much. That's such an expansion as to be. It's astonishing, and so I wasn't alone in that. But at least at that time, I saw that statistic and I was like, oh no, society did fall apart. But it just fell apart intellectually or rationally, whatever. Because at that point, I think for about a year, I've been arguing people online, being like, well, no, look at this. No, look at this. Look at this. Early estimates for this and this, you know. And being like, wait a second, let's stop believing. And this is one of the things that lit my fire. But again, it lit the fire to me because it scared me, and then I had no right to be scared, which speaks to my fear response. Generally speaking, if someone honks at me, let's say I'm walking across the street, a car honks at me, it startles me, creates a fear response. My synaptic speed is it's like the Flash, guys. It's real fast. It's like A Train on the boys, guys. It's boom. It goes from fear into anger so fast. My fear response goes right into fury. And so I was like, how dare you? And a little bit becomes how dare you frighten me? So
Yeah.
when it frightened that many people, then that fostered my like what's the word? My messiah complex, especially as a father, husband, man. And then if a man of any privilege, then oh my gosh, this is absolutely my responsibility. It was like, oh my gosh, this many people have been driven to radical degrees of hoaxed fear. I mean, in some ways I felt like I was made for it, as I've told you. I was like, I've dreamed of this my whole life. Like this is the time I was made for, to be like telling people to stop being afraid of malarkey, of a boogeyman, of like false fear, you know. But that one got me, well, again, for longer than the Trump one. Didn't get me for that long, but got me long enough and got me deep enough that when I found out it was a hoax, I was like, oh, how dare you?
So here's the pattern. It invoked the same
Yep.
like ferocity because you were duped.
Yeah.
I am very anti honking. This is something Rachel and I talk about because I drive most of the time,
Yeah.
and I'm. It's interesting because I have a similar thing. I'm like when people honk, like to me, there better be a real problem,
It's better be an emergency. Yeah.
And I know in some cultures, and you know, I've experienced, particularly in Vietnam, some sort of East Asian cultures,
Yeah.
the total culture of driving is different. It's not about
Oh, completely. Yeah.
about flow.
Yeah.
When you're flowing like a little beep, I'm here,
Yes. Yeah.
it kind of makes some sense, but that just laying on and what's remarkable to me, some people honk so quickly. I'm
Yes.
I'm trying to calculate how they're even postured while they're driving. because my
Yeah.
my instinct
Yeah.
always is to actually avoid a bigger problem. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I go to like, oh, how can I swerve a little out of the way? How can I adjust? How can we kind of work together?
Yeah.
Um, Whereas clearly some people's immediate reaction to anything going wrong in the car is to honk. Now, folks, I'm no saint. In other areas of life, I tend to being grumpy or reactive.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe I can have empathy and relate in that way, but it also seems dangerous. It seems like if you're more focused on alerting the other person that you're pissed off or making them fearful, as in your
Yes.
case, which is just
Yeah.
spreading fear and sort of negative feelings, then you're clearly not spending time on actually solving the problem or avoiding a bigger accident.
Yeah. 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 Oh, absolutely. The horn in our Prius ceased to function for some reason. I didn't fix it for 3 years. And I was like, and listen, I tried to use it twice during those 3 years where I was like, oh dang, I could have used a horn right now. This person is just pulling into the lane. I can't. I was like, I have no way to tell them that they're literally about to hit me or whatever. Um, and my wife Archie, and I think women in general are a little more safetyist, generally speaking. And she definitely was like, okay, we need to do something about this. And I think basically we ended up having a whole nother problem like, oh, she got an accident, I think. We had to fix a whole bunch of stuff. And then while we were doing that, she was like, oh, while they're doing it, can they fix the horn? And I was like, oh man. But again, that's my thing. I was like, yeah, don't sound the alarm. But again, it's also very childlike. I have two small children. And this is the COVID thing is like this too. This is what made me mad that I was like, grow up. Where I was like, just because you're afraid doesn't mean everyone else has to be afraid. Just because, like my youngest daughter, she is 8. When she's pissed off or just kind of like grumpy, she's going to put it out there in the world, and that's not just like embodying her emotion. But she actually wants to. I've watched it happen enough. She kind of wants everyone to know it and everyone else to kind of feel it and kind of,
Yeah.
I hurt. I want you to hurt. Which again, this is the Iraq War, right? I hurt. I want someone else to hurt. It's a human thing, but it's also a childlike thing, and you kind of at some point you kind of have to get over it. And so when you're like, oh, I don't like that, I don't like that, I want to make you not like this, that
Yeah.
thing. You're like, what is going on, folks? Like again, are we? This is like intellectual, but it's also mortal, and it's also emotionally regulatory. Again, speaking to my own fears, I don't want to be an emotionally unregulated person.
And so check this out. I can lead us back to my hoax,
Yes.
combining Priuses making loud noises
Mm.
and the period of time that your hoax represented.
Yeah.
So when lockdown was happening,
Hmm.
and we've talked about this a lot, but here in Chicago, we went pretty much, full hog,
Yeah.
full full hog, maybe
Whole hug. Whole hug.
full
Yeah.
hog.
Yeah.
There you go. And so things were quiet, which was sort of a free for all
Wild.
for
Yeah.
folks who like to, in this case, steal catalytic converters. And the catalytic converter on the Prius supposedly is worth like $1,000 because it's a low emission vehicle, and I think they've got extra
Mm.
special things that were probably mined by some child in Malaysia or whatever.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Should I pick on Malaysia? I don't know where they come from, but mine was stolen twice
Jeez.
until my mechanic actually put literal armored plating on the bottom of my car.
Gosh, dude, that's crazy.
But the funny thing was, I I didn't fix the first one for a while. I don't know, I didn't have a lot of money right at that point. And weren't really any cars on the road. And
Yeah.
so it's probably true of any car without a catalytic converter. It's basically like without a muffler. So it just turns it into like this monster vehicle, muscle car sound. And so I'm driving around in what's at the time, especially was one of the quietest vehicles around. This was kind of when electric cars were barely creeping in.
Yeah.
And and yet I have the loudest engine on the block. So I didn't need a horn because people could hear me coming from like a mile away.
Yes.
And so that I'm just going to tag into your hoax, which mine was also COVID related. You know, you sent this list, which was handy of the list of media hoaxes.
Yeah.
So I picked the two on there that were COVID related very specifically, where cloth masks are good and getting vaccinated prevents catching COVID.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a weird one.
you could, and I would add some version of like lockdown was necessary or good to that
Yeah.
list. They all bundle together really in really attached to what you were talking about. And
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, I was caught in this for months. I mean,
Mm.
absolutely months. And
Yeah.
we've talked about this so much. I don't think we
Yeah.
need to just go listen to like our first couple episodes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it was folks in this area, and particularly in my circles, were so committed to this. You'd almost think we liked it, or we
Mm.
wanted it in some way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe that's true. I mean, I don't know. As an empath, there were some benefits to the lockdown. I was like, oh, everything's quiet. It's kind of
Yeah, yeah,
chill
yeah.
and nice, and there's not much there's
I
not
don't have
much
to turn
traffic.
on, yeah, I don't have to turn on all these invitations that I don't want to go to.
Yeah, right. So I was like, oh, are the empaths driving this hoax? I don't know,
Yeah, yeah.
or the introverts maybe. But anyway, so I don't even know. I mean, I feel like it went on for a whole year pretty much
Yeah.
before we really started demasking and coming out of lockdown and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how many of them, well, actually the first two for you then had that echo too of um overreactions or false reactions to a genuine calamity. Meaning COVID-19 is not a nothing of a virus. Like that's a legit dangerous virus to certain sections of the population, especially older people. So like your parents or whatever would be in a like, uh-oh, we need to check this out. Um, you, not really. Kids, not at all. Not less than influenza, right? And you don't freak out about flu. But like, it was big enough, but then having all these completely inappropriate reactions that people pretended were justified or real. Very similar to the weapons of mass destruction into shock and awe thing. And likewise, into shock and awe being like, let's do all these super big drastic things. So it's like a razzle dazzle shock and awe thing. Everyone has to wear masks to go get in anywhere. You're like, wait, what? We've never done that before. This is no, it's big. We got to go big. And then you're like, actually, everyone has to stay home. You got to close all the businesses. You're like, what? We've never done that before. And you're like, yeah, no, we got to go big. We got shot. It was the same tactic of go big, 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 and go so big that it seems like, well, this must be real because they're treating this so serious. And there's something related to a genuine threat involved. So part of your brain goes, oh, okay. The same way if you like smelled a little bit of smoke because people were smoking cigarettes in an alley, and then 7 fire trucks pulled up outside a building, you would probably walk away from that experience being like, yeah, I guess there was like a super big fire over on whatever Bleecker Street. You would just like your brain would just do that. That's what our brains are designed for. But it's interesting, those are kind of similar in that way too. Like a little bit of a threat and then almost a completely irrelevant shock and awe response. And you're like, well, I don't know, sure, sure. But it's in some ways it's a smart tactic. Okay, my last one, so we can kind of bring this in for a landing, is a milder one. And this is a multimedia hoax. 50% of divorces, 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's something I just thought. I was like, oh gosh, what a sad statement. And to me, the reason I fell for this hoax was it confirmed my bias as to the reprobate moral nature of our culture at large, which means generally in a marriage, you make a commitment ceremony where you promise, and classically, till death do us part. So you make a statement of promise, and that means 50% of people who do that break their promise.
The fine print there, was the death of our love.
Right? Yeah, yeah. All of a sudden, yeah, yeah. So they look for some sort of like legal loophole and why they're not a liar. And again, this is why I think divorce is most devastating. It's certainly and I've not been divorced, but I've ridden shotgun on multiple divorces for my dad. So that's one of the worst things about divorce is not just like, oh, it's the end of all these hopes and that sort of thing, the sort of miscarriage of what you hope the future would be. But it's especially if you have kids, it's yes, you're dividing your family and mommy and daddy don't love each other the same anymore. Um, Destabilizing. But your kids also know you're a liar now because you've already explained to them what marriage is. And then they're like, oh, but you're a liar. You said your mom loved mommy forever. Well, you
Right.
said you'd love daddy forever. So you're a liar. And then listen, this happens to all kids. It happens to all humans. You realize your parents lie and are fully full of crap sometimes. But it's because of that. You're like, ooh, and it's such a big promise. Marriage is such a big promise for so many people, like with a ceremony and a thing. You're like, for many people, it's the most loudest promise anyone will make in their entire lives. It's the most expensive promise. It's the loudest promise. It's the, my wife has gone through the citizenship test. That's maybe kind of similar. There's big ceremonies, a bunch of people around. But a marriage is like, people are like, and we want everyone to witness this, and not just strangers, all our closest friends to witness that we're committing this. So I was like, and you know what? Yep, that's how reprobate and gross we are. Half of us are liars, you know? But it's not true. Um, it was, I think there was at one point in our past history, there was a time where it kind of got close to that or whatever, but it's not remotely the case at all. And I didn't get that angry about that one. I just was like, Brendan, because all that did was it did foster a culture in which divorce was treated much more casually, which is destructive. Um, but I think at that point, since it turned me into like a vilifying others, I mostly just was angry at myself. And I was like, you know what, Brendan? Look at the ones you're susceptible to, how crummy people are. And then the nice thing is it's helped. I actually feel like it's helped. All these have helped me. But it helped me over a long term to be like, you know what? Maybe people are just 30% liars. Which is a chiller place to be, you know?
Well, I believe that and probably passed that one on, and I have no idea where it came from. So you're characterizing it as a media hoax. So was
Yeah,
that?
because to me, it's something I've seen repeated in news pieces. I've seen it. I mean, I don't even know how many times on social media, which is our part of our modern news media landscape, and then it's certainly in pop media, where it comes up in like casual conversation. It's like I've heard it more often than you hear. Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's like screenwriter's favorite little like adage, pop adage, right? That's of course not the literal definition of insanity, but whatever. That's another hoax I never fell for because I'm a semantics nerd. But yeah, but likewise, like it's in the ether, and I've heard it in television programs and news programs and blah 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 blah. But I and
Yeah.
I and I fell for it, and I at least for me it was helpful to know that I'd fallen for it, and then know why. But I think actually for me this is actually one of the more recent long-term hoaxes, I believe. I feel like I've only learned that that wasn't true or hasn't been true for a very long time in the past like year or so. I just sort of accepted it. It kind of was background noise. I wasn't particularly upset about it. It didn't affect my life particularly much, you know.
Yeah. So what is the actual statistic?
Oh, good question. Let me look it up while you tell me about your hoax.
Well, I'll just say, yeah, that's certainly one. Like I said, that I guess I bought into, but I think it sounded like you were probing yourself to in some kind of query of, oh, did I want this to be true? Like, because it sort of validated other
Yeah. Yep.
uh skepticism about the
Oh, I
whole
guess it's around 25%
25.
in the US. Yep. Although if you're
And
oh,
what's your source there?
if you're entering right now, I know, right? This is literally just this is a blog post, guys, by Psychology Today, 1 and 4, and it doesn't have a click through, which is that's a bad sign, guys. Although I have read this elsewhere, so I can't validate other than spurious suggestion. But that people who have multiple marriages have a much higher rate of divorce, and that just makes practical psychological sense.
I mean, that
Um,
just makes like numeric sense, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It did, according to Business Insider, divorce hit a peak about 41% of people who married 35 years ago, but it's been falling ever since. Um, yeah, there you go.
I wonder if we almost want it to be 50-50 so that if we happen to get divorced, then we're not, oh crap, like if I
Yeah,
was like 5%, I'm like, oh, damn it, like what
yeah.
did I I must be the worst. Like,
Yeah.
how
You're
did I
like,
do
no,
this?
I'm just sadly, I'm just average.
It was a flip of a coin,
It's
folks.
always just a lifetime commitment. It's just flip a coin,
I remember you there were a lot of touching things at our wedding, but you kind of grabbed me pretty intensely at one point and helped me feel in to the truth of this
Mm.
commitment. You're like,
Yeah.
this is big. I won't try to paraphrase what you said, but it was
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
the intensity of that energy. I was like, oh shit, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's very hard on the I didn't have like a wedding like that, but it's very hard on the day because there's so much it's planning an event, right? You're just like event planning most of the time and trying to get the ceremony right, get everything organized, and get people on time, blah, 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 blah. And oh, my dad's here. Oh, cool. I gotta give him the thing, and oh, I gotta give the groom gift, or you know what I mean? It's just all these logistics, and you're like, this is a public commitment ceremony. And especially in your case, there was like a daughter involved. You're like, this is so big, and it'll get big in the moment in the wedding. But I feel like it would again. I don't know because I didn't experience it, but I'm an imaginative person and an actress, so I can feel my way through it. That it probably would only be like 15, 20 minutes into the ceremony, we'd actually start to be like,
Well, especially because it's performative.
whoa,
For those
yes,
of us who aren't used to being on stage, I mean, I've been on stage
yeah,
and it wasn't that
yeah,
shocking.
yeah,
If you're not used to that, like it would take you that long just to get used to the idea of being
yeah,
hearing all these people stare at you.
yeah, exactly. They're all looking at us. What do they want?
All right, I can help us land the plane. So I went with there's another sort of grouping here around mostly peaceful protests, which was also on that list,
Mm, yeah,
which I thought was an interesting phrase, and you and I chatted about it a little bit. And in some cases, like that's like sort of technically an accurate statement, but it's I think the question there is how were different protests conveyed in the media? I mean,
yeah,
tucked
yeah,
under that, another one on that list was January 6th was an insurrection.
yeah,
And technically, I've even heard you say, well,
yeah.
yeah, technically it was a kind of insurrection.
Yep. And we've had multiple since.
And
Yep.
yet it was like 1% of the people were involved with storming the
Yeah.
Capitol. And,
Yeah.
I don't know, I got a little prickly with being like, well, wait, is this talking about 2020 BLM? Because I was super involved. I probably went to 20 to 30 protests. I lost count.
Yeah.
And in my experience, the vast majority of those were absolutely peaceful. I mean,
Yeah.
there were like kind of the first night, that Saturday where the cops were in riot gear and the city was all locked down. That got pretty intense. There was another one where a group of people I knew actually tried to like literally tear down a huge statue of Columbus that was almost successful. I
Oh
think that
yeah.
was somewhat violent. But yeah, at least here in Chicago, like compared
Yeah.
to I don't know, dozens of protests where people were really
Yeah.
marching through the streets and
Yeah.
really got, and I would include, I mean, a lot of those folks are just like all cops are bad, like, very attached to defund the police, which I was also involved with. I would even say the cops weren't really creating much
Yeah.
danger in my experience, um, and they were just in many cases clearing the street, just saying, "All right, you have a right to protest." I'm like, you know what? There were many times when I was just sinking into gratitude of being an American because there are lots of places in the world where you know, that wouldn't be allowed. And
Yeah.
I think the point here is there also was lots of damage done,
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
property damage. People were killed. I mean, so yeah. So in my lived experience, mostly peaceful is true, but maybe that somehow. Again, I guess if you receive any of this in a binary way, it's like you're just going to say, "Oh, well, they were all peaceful." Well, so, that's not what it says. It says mostly peaceful.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the media hoax element of that was I think in Kenosha, there was a couple times where people were like mostly peaceful protests, and there was like a funny now, of course, some of these might be fakes, whatever, but there was like chyrons on the screen as someone was reporting with like a flaming building behind them. And they were like, the mostly peaceful protest did descend into blah blah blah. And you're kind of like, okay, it felt like 1984. It was like you were gaslighting me at the time. It's that whole like, are you gonna believe me or your lying eyes? And you're like, okay, well, I mean, Kenosha was brutal, Minneapolis was rough. Not every city. LA had roughness, although there was a bunch of weird stuff in LA. We were like, all right, someone fostered this pretty intentionally. But things got pretty violent, pretty nasty. And both times around, actually. I mean, was it Dallas, right? So like multiple people were murdered in like one weekend.
Yeah.
The first BLM thing. And so like, okay, but it was yeah, I think largely it's that has to be seen in context of mostly peaceful protests, and then January 6th was an insurrection meant like, and the worst thing we ever saw. There was like, well, wait a second, no, that was also a mostly peaceful protest. So if we're going to use the language, we have to use the same language, or then, and that's why I think really that's what lit it on. People made jokes about it before January 6th, that they were like, oh yeah, the peaceful protest with the person behind you, like, they're like downtown, this city is safe, and then they're like, the person gets robbed or what, you know what I mean, dirt on while they're making the news package. But then
Well,
after January 6th, people were like, hold on a second. What? No, no, no. This was you guys were mostly peaceful protest people, so you can't change your thing now just because you don't like what people are protesting about.
and I'm in the camp of splitting up protests and riots, which I know from the outside might seem like splitting hairs. But in a lot of cases, people came in from outside of the city just to loot and,
Yeah, to wreck shop. Yeah.
you know, whatever. So, uh, but yeah, no, but I get that. And then I didn't follow that closely, but I guess at that time, the last one was Trump used tear gas to clear the crowd for the Bible photo, and that's probably one I just was like, yeah, yeah, that sounds on brand for him. That's
I
probably
know.
happened.
I know. I saw that on the list. I was like, oh, I guess I got to look into that. I was like, I think maybe the tear gas part wasn't real, but I was like, didn't they clear it? Oh no, might have been for a different. I think it was conflating multiple events that I recall. Um, Although, listen, as a Christian, I just was furious about his Bible photo. So I don't even. I was like, anything could be wrong at that point.
Well, nice balloons.
Just got a bunch of balloons for saying, as a Christian, I was furious about his Bible photo. Hooray! Happy birthday! Thanks, Zoom, you big weirdo. I guess that means this episode's over. Thanks a lot, Zoom.
I think it's actually Apple, but anyway,
Yeah,
I love you
I love
and
you.
thank you for helping me fall for fewer hoaxes.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, helping. Thank you very much. I would say specifically for um, having, I think, a more hopeful and less dire view of my fellow human being. That's a
Bye.
big one. Bye.